Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, friends, so this is the last full day of the retreat, and so far we've been talking mostly about sort of the psychology of the mind and how our mind creates its suffering, its web of suffering through its wrong understanding and accumulated wrong habits, thoughts and actions according to the law of karma, and talking mostly about the meditation practice. Now, yesterday we discussed the Noble Eightfold Path, which is really meditation practice. People think meditation practice is part of the Eightfold Path, but actually the whole practice of the Eightfold Path involves meditation, a kind of meditation, a certain viewpoint that you're hopefully, trying to cultivate, most of the time, in terms of the worldview, right thought, right action. Because even observing the precepts requires mindfulness, and that's why the people break the precepts, because they don't have mindfulness. Anyway, so today I want to kind of tell a little journey, or take you on a little journey, and to illustrate how the average person, comes into, how their life is being, caught and harassed by, the various conditions of the world and the impermanence of the world, and, not knowing how to deal with it. So most people, what they do, they deal with the problems of the world by, going to taking pills or going to shrinks and having other people tell them what's wrong with them, and basically trying to control the world from the outside, going inward. And hopefully from our study of the meditation, what we've been doing the last few days, or your own understanding, is that really we tackle the problem from the inside, and then allow that to manifest outwardly. In other words, we go into the mind and try to fix the mind, at its base, at the origins. And then when the mind is sort of tamed or somewhat starting to change from the inside, then those changes will manifest in the outside. But anyway, so do you all want to take a little journey? Huh? Take a little Sunday stroll? Okay. So let's say there's a person who wants to go out in the countryside on a nice summer day and enjoy, a nice walk through the fields and through the forests and have a picnic and just enjoy the day. So he drives the car out, and parks at a trailhead, and then starts to have the walk. I'll try not to say his or her. So as that person is walking along, out through a field, all of a sudden there's a big earthquake. And the ground starts rumbling, and then cracks open up in the ground, and the person gets scared and starts to run this way and jump over the cracks, and it's really terrified. And but then eventually, the earthquake subsides, and he avoids any falling into a crevice or any effects of that. And so they think, okay. And then he continues to walk, thinking that danger's over. And then all of a sudden there's a tsunami, big flood. Earthquakes cause tsunamis, right? And so he gets terrified. These waves are starting to come. And so he runs and runs, tries to outdo the waves, and he's able to run up onto a higher little elevation and escape that flood. And again, then he keeps walking. And after some more time, there's a big tornado, big wind. Trees are getting uprooted and flying about, and so he takes cover. Then finally that tornado goes off. And then he starts going through a forest. And all of a sudden, a big forest fire. Somehow a forest fire starts. The trees start burning, and it's really hot, and big, huge fire. So again, he panics, and that person panics and finds a way to run around it or get through it somehow without getting, too burned. Maybe he gets a little smoke inhalation. But then, again, so he's wondering, what the heck is going to happen next? Then he goes a little bit further, then 5 bandits jump out from behind some big rocks and start chasing him with upraised swords to rob him or kill him. So he gets scared and he starts running and running. And he sees a village. They're all going to run in the village and get some help. So he runs into the village, goes on knocking on all the doors, and nobody's home. It's an empty village. No help. And then he sees a ghost. He gets scared and he runs. He runs out of the village, and then he sees a broad river flowing by. So a plan comes into his mind. If I can get down to the river and get across the other side, I can escape these dangers. He goes down to the riverbank. Then you realize, oh my gosh, I can't swim. And then how am I going to get across that river? And then he sees 8 logs sunk in the riverbank. And an idea pops into his mind, if I can somehow pull those logs out, tie them together and make a raft, then I can get on that raft and cross the river to the other side that's looking very peaceful. There's the coconut trees, some of the kind of trees with the, leaves blowing in the breeze, and it looks very peaceful on the other side. And he's still looking over his shoulder to find out what dangers come next. So with great effort, so he has faith springs up, and he can, that person can pull the logs out and make a raft. So with great effort, he starts pulling the logs out. When you pull a log out of the mud, it makes this kind of a sucking sound, like, pulling them out. So he's able to pull them out, and then he has to tie them together. So he looks around and, he sees some vines hanging in the trees. So he's able to get those vines and lash the logs together and make a raft. And now with great effort, he's got to pull that raft down to the river bank or closer to launch it into the river. So he's able to do that. And then he gets on the raft and he starts to paddle out. And he starts to paddle out a little bit away from the bank. He gets nipped by some fish. Piranhas in there. Piranha, right? So they were trying to eat his fingers. And so he gets scared, and somehow he paddles faster and faster and faster, and somehow gets away from those piranhas. And then out ahead, there's whirlpools. And so you have to avoid getting sucked down into the whirlpool. And so with more great effort, he paddles harder and is able to avoid the whirlpool. And then, in the middle of the river, there's a big sandbar, which would threaten to block his ability to reach the other side. So again, with great effort, he was able to steer the raft around the sandbar. And finally get close to the other side. Now as he's getting close to the other side, he's trying to find a place. Where is he going to find a place to land the raft? Because there's a lot of tree trunks and a lot of other debris which is there in the water, submerged tree trunks and so on from past storms, which would block the raft from actually getting to the bank. So he searches and trying to find a little opening where he could get through that. So finally he does that. He spies a little opening and he heads for that, and then finally he reaches the bank. And then he gets off the raft and standing on the ground, and it's very peaceful. He sees some fruit trees and papaya trees and mango trees, and there's some tropical birds singing, and it looks very, very peaceful. And then he wants to take a walk. I keep saying he, excuse me. Okay. So then he thinks, should I carry this raft on my head, or should I just leave it here? He thought, no, I'll leave it here. And so the person walks free, and he gets some fruit, carries it, and he goes up onto a little hill, where he gets a 360-degree panorama of the whole countryside. And then there's some trees, and he builds a little thatched kuti hut. And he lives, or she lives, they, it, whatever, the person lives happily ever after. So that's the story. Now I want to go back and see the symbology of those events, of that journey, according to the Dhamma. And using the comparisons of aspects of the Dhamma practice on that person's journey to safety. Now, that person could be anybody, you or anybody that's just wanting to mind their own business and enjoy life, and go out on a nice Sunday stroll in the countryside. And then the earthquake, the flood, the tornado, and the fire. What do you think those four dangers are?
Four elements.
Yeah, you've heard this story before. Yeah, the four elements. So I mentioned them briefly, but I didn't maybe go into them in detail. But basically, the four elements that comprise our body, as well as everything else in the material world, this house, trees, rocks, anything of a material nature, that aggregate of form, okay? Everything is made up of molecules, right? Even the rocks and this planet. Anyway, so that the earthquake represents the instability of the earth element. And then the flood is the water element. The wind is the air element. And the fire is the fire element, or temperature element. So these four elements are what comprise, and they're always subject to changing. Because when these elements get out of balance in the body, we've all heard of, in medicine, right? They say too much wind in the body causes a problem, too much heat in the body causes a problem, too much cold in the body causes a problem, too much heavy earth element can cause a problem. So they get out of balance, and that's when we have pains and sickness. So, and they're always harassing people. I mean, almost every single person in the world gets affected by sickness, disease, old age, and death, right? And that's because these elements are impermanent. They change like everything else. They have a lifespan, constantly changing, and they are unpredictable, just like the elements in nature. Earthquakes are kind of unpredictable, right? And volcanoes, floods, fires, tornadoes, hurricanes. So this just represents, and people are terrified of them. Anybody disagree? People down in Florida are always worrying about when's the next hurricane going to hit, or people in California, when's the next fire going to arise, or earthquakes. Over here, maybe nor'easters or something. I don't know. But so anyway, those four elements. They're always terrifying people's lives, especially with the body and so on. And so they try to, find safety in that. They try to find danger by trying, everything they can in the world prevent various diseases or other things happening to them. And then the 5 robbers. I bet you can guess that one, right? We just talked about that.
Khandhas?
Yeah, the 5 aggregates. The 5 robbers. What do we call them 5 robbers? Because again, they're trying to kill us. Again, because one of them is this earth element and the 4 elements of our body in the physical form. And then the painful feelings that are going through it. And then our perceptions. Even we get scared of our own perceptions. Like a person sees a rope, takes it for a snake, and then panics and runs and trips and breaks their leg. Or so many other things. You mistake somebody for somebody else, or your perceptions get colored and cause you fear and so on. So we're getting terrified by these two. And our volitional activities. I mean, our mind making us do things we don't want to do. And, because of our strong greed and so on. Is that thing working?
Yeah, there are just notifications coming up.
Yeah, so all those 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, volition, and even our consciousness. Because even our consciousness is changing. Sometimes the mind is clear, sometimes it's not clear. Sometimes people even go unconscious, or their mind gets altered in some ways. Hallucinations, other mental states. And then, so again, to get away from the dangers of those aggregates, because they're impermanent, then the person runs to find some safety, some help. So where do people run for help? To get out of their states of mind or their boredom, or they run to Las Vegas, they run to Cancun. They run to whatever, any kind of amusement and distraction to distract their mind away from whatever is, happening in their life. But those things are very short-lived. Even when people are going on vacations, things happen to them, don't they? They wind up getting robbed or killed or anything they do. All these extreme sports, people doing all these things to somehow enjoy life or get away from their problems, the boredom, or there's situations, home life. But yet they still, they might find some little temporary pleasure, but in many cases it causes them even more pain than it was worth. So that's like the empty village. That means actually it refers to the 6 senses. So to escape something, people go to the movie theater, or they go to the plays, or they whatever, just to see something, get distracted by seeing something. Or hearing, they go to concerts, play music. You see people walking around with headphones all the time, right? Going to eat to get good taste. They put on all kind of perfumes and cosmetics to cover up the odor or to try to entice other people. Thinking that that's going to somehow alleviate their problems. But again, in most cases it doesn't. It causes more problems, or at least other problems. And then the ghost. What's a ghost?
No self.
Yeah, no self.
No self.
Then he realizes, who the heck is No one's in control of this body. I can't do anything. The experience of no self, when you realize this, the sense of I and me is just a kind of an illusion. Because when you say the word self, that means you should own it. But we don't own this body. We're only a temporary occupant, you could say. Anyway, so after experiencing all that, he runs down to the river and sees the broad river. Now, what does the river represent? Well, the river of life. It's the river of life. And, that's always changing. From the moment you're born to the moment you die, every single day of your life is different. There's different things you've seen, heard, tasted, smelled, touched, thought about, different things you've encountered. That changes you in one way or another. So life is a constant changing process. And then he realizes he can't swim. What does that mean?
Doesn't know how to live.
Right, he doesn't know how to skillfully deal with these the vicissitudes of life and all the dangers, except for, running around and doing all these things I've already mentioned. Well, trying to remove them, get away from them, but most of those things is not working. So you realize that you can't swim. And that's when people start turning to religion, right? I mean, usually people, like maybe even yourself, I don't know, everybody comes to Dhamma from a different point of view, or a different experience. Especially these days, people have tried everything under the sun to get over their problems, taking every kind of pill, going every kind of therapy, every kind of shrink, every kind of diet, changing their jobs, changing their living locations, but very seldom finding any, permanent satisfaction. So they turn to, they've tried everything else, then they hear Dhamma. Like, remember back the first time that you heard Dhamma. What was the situation in your life when you first started getting interested in Dhamma or meditation? There must have been something that triggered it off. In my own case, it was like the camel that broke the straw that broke the camel's back. I had been traveling across Europe as a wandering hippie, staying stoned on drugs, and had this, fantasies about going to India or going to Afghanistan, buying a kilo of the best hashish, going up to the Himalayas and smoking my brains out. That was a fantasy the hippies had back in those days. But it almost cost me my life because I was busted for trying to smuggle hashish out of the country and got put in prison, an Afghan jail, which you could probably ponder about. It's probably not the best place to be, but actually it was. But so that was what got me to start thinking, I got to do something. I got to get off the drugs. I got to change my mind around. I got to find some direction, not just being a wandering hippie running around, going to all the hippie places and so on. So anyway, so then that person wondering what is he going to do, and he sees the 8 loves. Should know what the 8 loves are by now. The 8-fold path. Okay? So it's like you're at your friend's house, you're going over there telling him all your problems and this and that, and then you spy a book on his coffee table, what the Buddha taught. What's it? Pick it up. And the guy said, oh yeah, you ought to read that. That's pretty good. So person reads and starts getting interested. Maybe this is something, maybe meditation is something I can do, you know. Yeah, was there 5 precepts? Yeah, I could probably use some of that, you know. And so, you know, he gets a faith that maybe he can actually do something. So with great effort, he starts to, you know, to try to practice. And to, you know, slowly pull out the logs, read some more books to get the right understanding, and starts talking to his friend about, you know, the Dhamma. And then, you know, starts practicing the 5 precepts. And then maybe even start to practice meditation, something like that. Okay, so he's, but then, so that faith springs up in the mind. So faith is important because it's faith in or confidence that what you're going to do will actually help you. And everything you've done in life, like you might have picked a career choice to study in, you know, college, because you had faith that, oh, if I can get an engineering degree, yeah, you can make good money doing that, or, you know, become a doctor or whatever, or some other thing that anything you do new, you have to have some kind of faith or confidence that it's going to work. Like a sport, you want to train in sport, you want to go to the Olympics, right? Or you want to, whatever. You have to have faith in yourself and faith in your coaches and things like that. Because if you don't, then you won't have the energy to do that. So that faith that it can be done. Maybe your friend, you went over to that friend's house where he had that book and you saw that, you know, he used to be a drinker and a partier. Now he started to change his life, and he said, "Oh, this might help this guy. You know, so maybe it can help me." So, and then, so he ties those. The vines are basically your right understanding of how the Dhamma works, and with that you tie the logs together. Then you launch. With more effort, of course, right effort is part of the Eightfold Path, right? So you launch the raft and you start paddling out. And then you get bit by, you know, sharks or piranha. So what does that mean? It means getting caught by sensual desire. Because, you know, when you start practicing Dhamma and you know, the precepts or even a monk or a nun or others, you know, maybe you want to start, you know, being more alone or practicing, you know, precepts like the celibacy or reducing the food. But then those old desires come up strong and are trying to attack you. It's what? Somebody have a question?
It's like something else.
What?
The mouse.
The mouse and
He's trying to say, what's this? Okay. So where were we? Yeah, so the getting bitten by sharks are the old temptations. Maybe you try to give up drinking. Maybe you try to give up eating too much junk food or some other bad habits. And maybe you want to stop hanging out with your friends that were always trying to lure you back to do unskillful things. So that's being caught by sharks, not having the strength to withstand those old habit temptations. And then, so it takes a lot of mindfulness and a lot of effort to do that, as you all know, right? Like even the effort to get up early in the morning so that you have time enough to get a good meditation in before going to work. And then the whirlpool. What do you think the whirlpool represents? Getting sucked into, dark states of mind, but especially things like depression or other unhealthy, states of mind, but especially depression because it's so widespread, and but it could be also sinking into hatred, sinking into, just a number of types of mental states. And so you have to know how to avoid, getting pulled underneath that through following the Dhamma, by developing meditation practice and avoiding a number of things in a life, following the precepts, especially those following the precepts, and stop indulging in the kinds of things that would cause you to get trapped in those things. So you try to avoid getting pulled down by that. And then the sandbar. What's a sandbar represent? So by this time in your Dhamma practice, you're getting, fairly good and balanced. And you might be thinking, oh, I'm such a good meditator, and look at all these other people that are still sunk in the mud. And so the sandbar represents the ego conceit, the I am conceit, pride and conceit. Or basically, getting stuck on the ego, on yourself, and thinking you're better than others, or all these kind of things that go on. Think you've reached some higher state than you have, and so on. So it takes a lot of mindfulness and awareness to avoid, getting stuck on that. And then finally you get over close to the other side. And actually at that point, avoiding the sandbar would probably be attaining stream entry, because that's when you actually give up the sense of self. You overcome the delusion of a self and so on. There's no self that you can get hung up on. It's just basically an illusion. But anyway, so you get over to near the other side, and those sunken things, what do you think those are? Well, that might be more difficult for you to understand. But it's what are called the higher fetters, which are basically the latent unconscious defilements in our mind, like greed, hatred, and delusion, which haven't been totally eradicated yet. Like we were talking about, I think, last night, that even when one attains stream entry, one still has not eradicated greed and hatred, even though they certainly wouldn't be as bad as they were before, but still, and other kind of things that are hidden under the consciousness. We think we're free of a lot of things, but that's because, our mind is not able to detect them. So then finally, and that only comes with like the full enlightenment, then finding that bank on the riverbank. So that riverbank represents Nibbana, the firm ground of enlightenment would be actually the the fourth stage of full enlightenment. And then you get off the raft, and then you're standing on the bank. Now you've found the bank of safety. So remember the other day, or when I mentioned the two pairs of persons? Anybody remember that?
Yeah.
In the puja?
Mm-hmm.
Two pairs of persons. So one of them was a person who was standing on the path, and the other one was eating the fruit. So the guy gets off the raft, and he's still kind of, all kind of tired, and because of all the effort and so on, to finally get off the raft, and just the excitement of finally being there, looking around. And he sort of, after he calms down, then he realizes, oh yeah, well, there's fruits. So he goes over there and then he enjoys the fruit. Okay, so that's so that whole story is like, the journey to on the path of Dhamma. That analogy. So it's called the simile of the raft. It's a simile in the Buddhist teaching, although I've kind of elaborated it and modified it a little bit to kind of make it more identifiable with the steps of the Eightfold Path and so on. So, and so the person, again, they look at the raft and they say, I'm going to leave this raft here. I'm not going back to the other bank. I don't need it anymore. Maybe somebody else, maybe a storm will dislodge it, or he pushes it away and maybe it floats back to the other side. Somebody else can use it. But he used that raft to cross the ocean of suffering. Once he or she got onto the other side, they don't have to carry it onto their head and make it a big burden, because their mind is already sort of free. So that's how we should use the Dhamma to cross the ocean of suffering, not using it for other means. Some people have used Dhamma to become famous preachers and amass thousands of dollars of money and gold watches and big groups of disciples, and we read in the text that there was a lot of downfalls. A lot of these so-called gurus and enlightened people who wind up getting into big scandals and causing a lot of problems. So they're using the Dhamma in the wrong way before they themselves got totally, changed or reached the other shore. So now, having said that, I want to open it up and see if any of you have any questions about anything, any of those things we just were talking about.
Finish about these two types of pairs of persons. So the one who reaches the bank.
Yeah, well, it's difficult to explain, other than what I've already said about it, It's very complicated. It takes a good deal of study and understanding of the Buddhist psychology to know what that means. But as I mentioned, there's a path moment when you have a realization and it destroys certain fetters. But then it takes time for the mind to get used to that kind of paradigm shift of their consciousness. It's now free from those certain fetters because it's a radical change within consciousness, and your life is going to change to some extent. So anyway, so it takes time to stabilize yourself to enjoy the fruits of that. But again, there's a lot of debate in whether there is a gap, whether there isn't a gap, and this and that, and so I wouldn't worry about it too much. But there's another analogy. There's a nice other analogy. Besides the crossing of the river with the raft, there's another analogy of a person, that same person that runs down to the riverbank, but instead of seeing the raft, he sees a vine, a rope, or a vine like a Tarzan vine. You've all seen the Tarzan movies?
Yeah.
And you got a vine hanging over a river, and Tarzan swings from one side to the other side, right? So he sees that vine hanging there. Then he gets the idea, if I can just run quickly and leap off this bank and grab the vine, the momentum of the body will swing me over to the other side. then I can let go and land on the other side of the river. Right? So that's a similar kind of thing, right? So that's an analogy to describe this sort of path and fruit. So the person, to get away from suffering, runs, that means they're practicing the Dhamma, especially like in practicing Vipassana and developing the insight knowledges, and then, the mind is just letting go of the five aggregates, letting go of sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, thoughts, and just in that flow of present moment awareness, just flowing on. And anyway, so a person leaps off of that bank knowing that there's nothing on this bank worthwhile getting attached to. So the mind leaps toward liberation, leaps toward freedom. He sees the rope as the path to freedom. So he leaps that, and his feet have to leave this bank, right? If he keeps one foot on the bank, he ain't gonna reach the rope. So he's got to have that faith and totally leap with both feet and grab the rope. And the momentum of that practice swings across. And then when he gets over the other bank, if he has any doubts and he's afraid and he doesn't let go, what happens? You go back to the other side, right? So only when you've totally let go and you have no use for the other bank of greed, hatred, and delusion, you let go. And then you drop to the ground. And you've all seen gymnasts when they do these vaults and so on, they're flying through the air, flipping, and then they land the jump, right? Or they land the end of it. And usually if they're not Simone Biles or somebody like that, they'll kind of stumble a little bit. A lot of them will lose their balance and fall down, or they'll take a few steps, and it takes them a while to kind of get and to realize that they did it, So the same way when you drop the rope and you land on the other side, it might take you some time to realize that you've made it there. Same way with the person on the raft. And then your legs get more stabilized, and then you can walk very calmly away. So that is, enjoying the fruit. But that could be different for every person. But don't really worry about that too much. Some of these things are very difficult to understand, and the problem is different translators, different teachers will explain that in different ways. So it's natural people get confused. It's like if you don't know trigonometry and you have different math professors telling you one thing about do it this way or do it that way, you're also going to get confused, right? So that's the problem. That's why you have to just do the practice, and when the time comes, you'll know what it is.
One of the symbols that you mentioned was the whirlpool or the sinking mental states. Could you share one or two antidotes to getting sucked into that whirlpool?
Well, what is the cause of depression?
Attachment to changing situations.
Wrong you.
Well, to their self. Oh, despair, woe, what's with me? I can't do anything. I lost everybody. Now I'm alone. Who's going to help me? I. That's one of the underlying main causes of it. And not knowing how to deal with the changing situation. So you get depressed. Usually it's with, like losing relationships, isn't it? Or losing a job, losing all your wealth. One time you had money to burn, do anything you want, then for whatever reason, stock market crashed, or Bernie Madoff, or what, all these things. Now you can't do anything. You can't even go buy a hot fudge sundae anymore. You don't have any money. So a person who's very attached to that is going to get depressed too, commit suicide. The depression leads to the suicide in a lot of cases.
I think you made a distinction the other day between two types of depression. One is a medically diagnosed long-term severe depression that may be caused by chemical imbalances in the brain, lack of neurotransmitters, and more routine type of, oh, woe is me type of depression.
I don't know, did I mention that yesterday?
Well, I wouldn't want to tell, like, you know, that the whole medical community is completely wrong about their theory about neurotransmitter, serotonin imbalances in the brain, chemical imbalances. I've heard that's a real thing.
Okay, yes, but there must be a cause of that too. And the cause of that could be other psychological factors. But I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist, so I can't really speak on a deep understanding of those things. But nothing happens without a cause. Any other questions? Okay, so I want to just mention about the rest of today and tonight. So we're going to, have our meditation now, and then yoga practice as normal. But at 6, we're going to have a kind of a break from 6 to 8 o'clock. And one of your fellow meditators has offered to supply a little New Year's Eve treat, or more than just a cookie. Oh my God, it's a cookie! I spent New Year's Eve with Bob. I think I want a piece of chocolate. Okay. So, I guess what you're gonna, there might be some pizza or a salad or something to eat, just in case you need a placebo or some kind of enthusiasm to stay up into midnight. So, an extra little energy boost.
We are going to start at 8 p.m., right? Evening time for evening discussion and meditation.
Yeah, so then at 8 o'clock, we're going to start the evening program, which will start with, you can still write questions. We start with, well, actually, I'm going to start with we're going to have a special puja tonight. It's a longer puja, a devotional puja, which involves reciting the qualities of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and some other things. It's recorded Pali chanting that I recorded many years ago, and in Pali, but I'll be overlaying that with the English translations, hopefully, if we can get this to work properly. So, and that may be about 20 or maybe even 30 minutes long, and then we'll meditate after that, just go into meditation after that. And then at some point, there's not going to be any exact timings, but sometime after 9 o'clock or 9:30 or so, then we do or after the sitting meditation, we do a walking. And I have to check the schedule, what I wrote down. But and then there's going to be then there's going to be a tea break around 10 o'clock, I think. And then they're listening to actually how many people have heard the Buddhamas Carol? So there's copies of it printed out on that shelf there, and you can have a copy and look at it. But it's I call it the Buddha's Carol because it was composed to the tune of, Silent Night, the Christmas Carol, Silent Night. Okay, so, but anyway, these words about it's the song of meditation, or the alternative title is the Ode to the Vipassana Yogi. So it's about a person who sits down and starts to meditate, enduring pain, trying to keep their back straight, and then focusing the mind on their breathing. And then finally, calms down the mind and overcomes the 5 hindrances and attains the first jhana. And then starts to practice vipassana, scanning the body, through the body to start to feel impermanence, observing the 5 aggregates. Observing the 6 senses arising and vanishing, the 6 senses. And then leading up to actually entering the stream. And tonight the yogi enters the stream. Tomorrow, Nibbana, no longer a dream. Anyway, that's the whole 6 stanzas. You can read it you can take a copy and read it during the evening break. But I recorded it with a couple of other people on a little tape. And so I'm going to play that as a start to that next meditation period. But it's only a few minutes long. And then continue to meditate again. And then at some point after that, there may be another short yoga session, just to arouse some energy if you're starting to, get tired of it a bit, just to try to boost your energy. And then we're sitting for one last meditation up until about midnight. And I'm also going to play a special mantra to begin that meditation, a very powerful Sanskrit mantra. It's very powerful. Just listening to it puts you in a meditative state. But anyway, and then meditating, over the midnight, and then any time after that, you'll be free to, take your rest or continue with more longer if you like. And tomorrow morning, people are still listening. How many people are listening?
6.
Okay. You hear that?
Yes.
Okay, well, we're going to broadcast that over Zoom tonight too. So what I was just talking about, if you want to try to follow that with us, you can tune in back at 8 o'clock on Zoom, the same channel. Anyway, so, but then tomorrow morning, it'll be optional whether you want to get up early in the morning to do that early morning yoga or meditation. And if you need to sleep, or if you have to drive a long distance tomorrow or something, you could just get up and come for the breakfast. And then after breakfast, about the same 9 o'clock, we'll have one last meditation, and then a closing Dhamma talk at 10, and then have lunch, about the same time, normally 11:30, and then retreats. Okay? Anybody have any questions about that?
Will there be another Q&A or no?
You can write down some questions, and if we can fit it in, maybe. And it could be tonight after the puja, but we're going to go into meditation right after the puja, and I don't want to do it. We could even do it before the puja. We could. So anyway, if you have some, but maybe just a few, you can write them down. Maybe we'll do that before we start doing the puja.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Bhante, can I join you tonight?
Yes.
Yes.
Dankeschön.
Dankeschön. Must be Ines. Was that you, Ines? Okay.
Ja, Bhante, das bin ich.
Ja, gut.
Dankeschön.
Bis später.
I will try to be there at 5 for yoga.
No, that's not going to be on Zoom.
I know.
Oh, you're coming in person. Okay.